The president and founder for the Center for Industrial Progress, the author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, Alex Epstein, is with us now. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Hey, Glenn. Great to be back on your show.
It's great to have you. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in Texas. There is no way we should be having these problems in Texas with our own power grid, with as much gas and oil as we have. What the heck is happening?
Yeah. So, this is something I've been warning about for a while. In September 2020, so I live in California. When the California blackouts were happening, I warned on Twitter that there are similar things happening in Texas. And so a blackout is an extreme event, but this blackout is not unprecedented. Texas has been having what I call industrial blackouts a lot. They call it demand management, but it basically means when there's not enough power, they have their industrial, or they'll call it curtailment. They'll have their industrial projects stop. They'll cut off power to industrial people. They won't cut it off to the home. So what's happened here is the lack of ability to meet demand has just been so extreme, and there are some unexpected events that everyone is seeing it. But it's important that this is not an unprecedented thing. It's just a more extreme thing. And this is something that's happened in California. It's happening around the country. And the fundamental reason whatever else is going on is the insistence on using unreliable wind and solar energy instead of reliable energy from coal, nuclear, natural gas.
Well, why is
that coal?
We have
just one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
We know that those sources, because there's issues of failures in Texas, and we'll talk about that. But we know for a fact that coal, gas, and nuclear can work under any weather conditions around the world. So whatever is going on in Texas, it's not that coal plants don't work, gas plants don't work. Nuclear plants is a combination of specific mismanagement and non-preparation in Texas. But the main thing is too much attempt to rely on unreliable energy, and that takes away focus and funding from the reliable energy and from making it resilient.
Okay, so I'm kind of caught in between. Some people are really, really pissed. Some people are like, well, that's what happens. I'm somewhere in between. There are times that I feel like I'm living in Syria. However, I don't expect the state to spend oodles of money protecting for something that happens once even when it comes to salt trucks and everything else, why spend the money? It happens every 10 years. This is something that happened, about every 40 or 50 years in Texas. So I cut some slack, but I don't understand why our coal plants are down. They are down. Our natural gas plants are down. Why?
Well, so I don't think the ERCOT is the so-called Reliability Council of Texas. They haven't been totally open, so it's not easy to tell exactly what's going on. There are a number of things that can happen. So one thing that they'll tend not to talk about is it's possible there's been some just mismanagement of supply and demand. So when demand was exceeding supply, they didn't curtail demand early enough, and that can cause things to trip up. It can be that specific plants aren't resilient enough. It can be that the fuel infrastructure, there's something off with that in terms of delivery of fuel. And this is something that I think that will emerge. But again, these are all things that are handled everywhere around the world. They're not inherent in coal, gas, and nuclear. Whereas what you see with wind and solar is they went completely out to lunch when they were needed most. So no matter how, even if there had been no freezing of the wind turbines, wind would have still been useless during very large portions of the situation. So
why?
The basic lesson.
Wait. Why would wind turbine, when there was winds, why were wind turbines not useful?
Well, they were frozen, some of them, but
I know that.
There wasn't wind the whole time. So even when there has it, a talking point for the other side has been, not that many of them froze. But if you look at the recent data over the last several days, there have been times when it's been 1 gigawatt out of 32. So part of the thing is they call the maximum possible wind the capacity, which is ridiculous. It's just a lucky situation. So they say, we have 32 gigawatts of wind, and everyone brags about that. But when the going gets tough, you had 1, 2, or 3 gigawatts of wind. So again, people always like to talk about the peak, but the real thing is, where are they when you need them? And the point is, they're not reliable. They're basically reliable for zero, and that's why they add so much cost, because you always have to have the unreliable infrastructure and the reliable infrastructure.
So some Greens are blaming not enough gas being online, and that's because the Green scheme requires it to be offline so we can get more electricity from wind, right?
Right. Everything is engineered around trying to maximize the amount of unreliable wind that you're using. So the whole way the grid is working normally, that's very wasteful, is you're cycling the gas up and down to accommodate the wind. If you had a reliable energy infrastructure, which we used to have around the country, you would just have a whole slate of reliable plants. And then when you had a lot more demand, you could just ramp a lot of the reliable plants up. But here, what Texas is trying to do is they're trying to minimize the number of reliable plants to cut costs. And this is why one of the public utility people said, I think in 2019, like, hey, we've got a serious issue. Our reserve margin is very scary. Texas is notorious in electricity circles for trying to get away with the lowest reserve margin possible, which means the smallest margin for error possible. It's gone down dramatically because they've been trying to cut prices and use wind. That's what happened in California. We didn't maintain our power lines enough because we didn't want to raise prices even more after we had inflated them with green energy. If you don't focus on reliability, you're going to lose reliability.
So in northern climates, when it gets cold like this every single year, how do they avoid this problem? Are they doing less green energy than Texas is?
Well, there are two things. I mean, so one is just they have better specific policies for their plants, and that can take all sorts of measures. But they just figured out. I mean, these places, Texas, even in bad weather, is not as bad as places around the world. I mean, obviously, you have places in Russia that are using these kinds of places in cold parts of Canada. Mm-hmm. Now, what's happening, though, it's important with the what I call the unreliable, so the solar and wind. It is possible to have a certain amount of them along with the reliable. So people in the Midwest are saying, hey, look, our wind turbines are working. And it's true, you can spend money and they don't necessarily ice. But the point is they're adding costs and they don't scale because, again, you have to pay for the unreliable energy infrastructure and the reliable energy infrastructure. Plus, it's really inefficient to run a grid that way because it's like stop and go traffic for the reliables. Plus, you wear them down a lot more quickly when you move them up and down. But the real thing to notice is you cannot rely on the unreliables. They're parasites. And what we have as a country is a policy that's trying to get us 100% dependent on these parasites. The real lesson of Texas is not that wind turbines froze. It's that wind and solar cannot keep us warm and powered in the winter. And so these Green New Deal type plans are a complete fiasco. And everybody should be asking Biden, what the hell would Texas do under your situation? How the hell would they get power if you're going to have nearly 100% wind and solar, which were totally out to lunch when they were needed most?
Jeez.
Wow.
I mean, we're now buying power, I believe, from Mexico, which is like, what? So are these, when people say the Texas grid, we're fine because we have our own grid in Texas. Have the progressive policies just pretty much dismantled any positives we had with that?
Yes. So this is, I was really scared of what was going to happen with this storm, and my fears unfortunately came true. But one thing I thought would be good in terms of a lesson is Texas does have this isolated grid, and that can be an asset or a liability. But what it really illustrates is the problem of relying on unreliable energy, because in California, even, we import 25% of our electricity, which at a given time can be 40% of our electricity. 25 is just an average. So we're bailed out by Nevada, Utah, Arizona. But what happens is they start trying to have more and more unreliables. Then we can't rely on them. And that's what happened in the summer. It got hot. Wind went down. The sun goes down every day. People are shocked. And we didn't have enough electricity and we couldn't get it. So everyone is trying to play this game of chicken with how much unreliable can I use and get away with it. And Texas is a good illustration because it's this self-contained world. And so we need to learn that the whole U.S. cannot be like Texas. And again, Texas is something like 20% wind. It's a tiny fraction of the Biden plan. The Biden plan says 100% carbon neutral grid by 2035. That's 14 years. And he's basically anti-nuclear. He does nothing to support nuclear. And the biggest lie, the biggest giveaway is none of these people support nuclear. Texas has not been increasing nuclear. If you look at Texas's plan, so I I just wrote about this on Twitter. It's just twitter.com/Alex Epstein. And so I wrote the statistiks. Listen to this, Glenn. Like, what would you think Texas has planned? Okay, so 0 nuclear plants. Nuclear are the most weather resilient plants. They store their food. So 0 plants, no new coal plants. They're probably going to shut down plants. 9.4 gigawatts of wind. So the existing 32 gigawatts, it went down to 1 gigawatt when it was needed most. So it's basically useless. And then 12 new gigawatts of solar, and solar was almost completely useless. So, and then 5 new gigawatts of gas, which is basically to handle all the ups and downs of the wind and solar. So this is Texas's plan, and that is a mild day at the beach compared to what Biden has planned. So we need to totally change direction.